Hey everybody, welcome back to another Maui Athletics live Q&A, covering a lot of your favorite fitness topics these days. We've got a bunch of really good questions queued up. And of course, for anybody that's joining us right now, if you want to ask any questions, certainly let us know. Unmute yourself and certainly type in the chat and we will get to those as soon as we can. So let's do what we can to be able to get through as many of these questions as we can because there is no way that we're going to get through all of them, but hopefully we'll give you some very good insight to a lot of these daily questions that people have to make your life better, make your life a little bit easier, and make progress a little bit faster. So let's start this out. Starting back up at the gym, can you talk a little bit about dumbbells versus barbells versus machine weights? Um, if I do not have access to the dumbbells, is it possible to just move on to a machine or a barbell? Yes, you can. And the really cool thing about looking at the research that's surrounding things like machines, surrounding things like free weights, is that contrary to popular belief, machines do increase functional capacity pretty much at the exact same level as free weights. Um, and there have been multiple studies that look at this these days, and most people don't really believe that. They're like, well, but what about, stabilizer muscles and all those different kind of things? And certainly there is some specificity in training. Like if you want to get better at doing Bulgarian split squats, you should probably get better by doing more Bulgarian split squats. But by doing machine type exercises, you're not going to lose significant amounts of progress in those areas. The real answer for any of these different things throughout fitness and nutrition is have a variety of different movements in play over time. You don't have to get everything in one cycle. The change, the variance will cover you for any deficiencies that any single movement has. There is not any single movement that is necessary or perfect. And so over time, bringing in a variety of different things like machines, cables, dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, it all adds into a better physique, better health, better performance, better strength. All of these different things add in, and they all have some unique benefits that they provide. So when people talk about this, I go into my gym and I'm a little bit stressed because I don't have available what, is 100% on my plan. If you can come up with a substitution that is appropriately done with a machine or, with a barbell when you've got something like dumbbells planned, or with dumbbells when you've got something like a barbell planned, that's a perfectly fine substitution, particularly if it's a day where you are finding that a lot of the equipment that you want to use is taken up. The movement differences in as far as like, a barbell bench press versus a dumbbell bench press versus a hammer strength bench press, the benefits, you will never notice the differences in these benefits outside of the specificity of training for that specific exercise. So if you want to get better at barbell bench press, you need to do barbell bench press. But these other things will help that progress, just not quite as fast as specificity of training. For
Hmm.
transition to general use, daily life, it's a wash. So don't worry about that. Find the one that is available, find the one that stresses you out the least, and get into that. Now, having said that, I do find value in certain things like you don't have to do a dumbbell versus a machine type of leg movement, but having some unilateral versus bilateral movements in play is important because there is a difference in doing some unilateral movements, whether they're machine related or whether they're dumbbell or barbell related, versus doing bilateral movements, whether they're machine or dumbbell or barbell. So the apparatus is less of the issue as the type of movement itself. So don't always think, okay, well, Alan said that it doesn't matter what I do as long as I do a movement. You're going to want to have things, assuming you don't have injury in play, like unilateral movements, particularly for legs to help strengthen, stability and all those different types of things. The difference is whether it's machine, whether it's dumbbells, whether it's barbells, it doesn't seem to make a massive difference, at least over the short term. So as long as you're changing these things up over time and incorporating a variety, you're doing what you need to do. All right. I developed an issue with always feeling off center, like one side is taking up most of the weight in a unilateral movement. I have even asked other gym goers if I'm lined up correctly. Is this overthinking or is it likely due to muscle imbalance, slight differences between limb lengths or something else? Um, when we talk about muscle imbalances, and this is something that seems to be on the minds of a lot of people because I get a lot of muscle imbalance questions quite often. Muscle imbalances aren't normal. You're going to have discrepancies between limbs. I mean, there's a reason people are like right-handed, right-footed, left-handed, left-footed. You have one that you are just neurologically stronger with, and so you're going to use that a lot more. So you're going to have more potential with that arm. So a bit of a discrepancy, or maybe even feeling like there's a bit of discrepancy, is completely normal as long as the actual performance in whatever you're doing isn't dramatically different It's not really anything to worry about. If it is dramatically different, that's where you might incorporate some things such as unilateral movements, where you add in 25% more volume on that weaker side. Maybe you use that weaker side as the determinant of your volume. So if you can only do four sets of 8 to 10 only, if you can do four sets of 8 to 10 with like your left hand and it's your weak hand, but you can do 5 sets of 8 to 10 with your right hand, you would stop at 4 sets until your left catches up to your right. Now, for most people, this is not a real concern. And some people say, well, my right arm is an inch bigger than my left arm. Doesn't matter. Just keep pushing yourself. And over time, things will start to even out, particularly if you're incorporating those unilateral movements. So this is not anything that I would say is necessarily wrong. When you ask, am I overthinking this? Chances are you probably are overthinking this. And obviously you cannot say that 100%, but if you want to, post up in our Mighty Networks community, a video of you lifting, we can take a look. We can see if you've got specifics about how you feel it's off balance. I mean, if you're doing bilateral movements and you're continuing to push towards that 1 rep in reserve, 2 reps in reserve, depending on where we are during a week, you're going to eventually get to the point where that other leg is going to have to take over because, like let's say you're doing a barbell back squat and it's bilateral and you feel like your left leg isn't keeping up with your right. If you're continuing to push up in that weight, the weaker leg is going to have to start to carry its own load. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to push up in weight anymore. And so, with progressive overload over time, it's actually going to even itself out and you're not going to have to worry about it. And if you can get somebody to take a look at you who knows what they're doing. And certainly you can do this by posting up a form check for us to take a look at. But if you're getting somebody behind you to take a look and say, hey, look, am I, dramatic? Do I have a dramatic hip shift or something like that going on? Well, yes, they can identify that. But as long as things are relatively, symmetrical, it's not anything that you really need to worry about. Just keep pushing yourself and realize that sometimes you're just going to feel a little bit off because that's the way that it is. And so I think that you're doing fine in most cases. And if you want us to take a look, certainly post that up. All right. Um, what weight gain would you expect to see coming from deficit to maintenance? This is a good question because this is something that takes people by surprise often. When you're coming out of a deficit, particularly if you've lost a significant amount of weight or have been in a deficit for a long period of time, you can expect a significant bump up in weight when you go to maintenance. That is your body refilling with muscle glycogen. It is water weight. It is food weight that you haven't had in play. And for women, maybe 5 to 10 pounds potentially. For men, it could be around the same or maybe even more because we're bigger, so we might be able to hold a little bit more food, a little bit more muscle glycogen, all those different types of things. But this is the type of thing that switching to maintenance, particularly after a successful fat loss phase, is usually where so many people end up falling off. And I mean, I don't think that people realize that maintenance can be harder than losing the body fat itself because it's difficult to stay motivated. These types of changes are things that can throw people off and demotivate you when you see the scale go back up. Even though you're much healthier than when you started, even though you're feeling a lot better, seeing 5 pounds come back on is like, oh my God, I've screwed up. And no, that's just what you look like normally. And I've talked about this in the past, but people oftentimes get married to that look that they have at the deepest of their cut, but that's not actually what you look like. Like you don't look like it's like a bodybuilder and the difference between what they look like when they're stepping on stage versus what they look like in everyday life. It's completely different. And you're never going to be able to maintain that really dry, thin-skinned look as a regular look throughout your life. You're going to be able to pick it up, 4 or 5 times a year if you wanted to like prep yourself for like a vacation when you're going to the beach or whatever it is, you'll be able to get down to that, but you're not going to be able to maintain that because that's not realistic. You cannot live your entire life in a calorie deficit. You can't live your life dehydrated. And people have a problem wrapping their heads around this, especially with how things like Instagram have become really famous because you don't realize that when you're looking at people that look dry like that all year long, including women, including doctor women. I know a lot of women doctors who are taking Anavar year long, and people would never expect that. And they think that it's just what they're saying is what they're doing is keeping them looking that way. But there is anabolic enhancement going on. And so, these looks that some of these people have, they might not even look bulky, but you're like, oh, that's the look that I want because they've got this, like really, really toned musculature and they're really good at what they do and blah, blah, blah. And if I just follow what they say, I'll get exactly there without realizing that, yeah, I mean, some of this is kind of unrealistic to maintain for long periods of time. And you can certainly dry out like that for a week, maybe two, but it always comes back. And holding yourself to that standard, men or woman, is going to be a one-way ticket to frustration. And so I want to bring this up because it's something that if you're aware of, you can realize, okay, well, I can get down to relatively lean, but that really dry look that I have at the bottom of my cut, that's not real life. Real life is you at maintenance. And those are kind of those bonus days where you're getting ready to go to the beach. And if that's the case, that's the case. But then you can start to plan ahead based on what you have coming up. And then you can be more comfortable throughout the rest of the year, not trying to push something that you can't possibly sustain. All right. Any tips for a successful maintenance phase? A lot of what we just talked about. It's setting proper expectations. And I think that the biggest thing that I would say is that people, when they're shifting out of that cut, they don't prep for the maintenance phase correctly. You're going to have to really realize that when you're coming out of a cut, particularly for a longer period of time, your hunger signaling is going to be up. Even compared to when you were at maintenance before at a higher body weight, your hunger signaling is going to be up. And so when you come up to maintenance, you need to be doing that. If you're smart, unless you really want to raw dog all of the willpower, you want to build up to maintenance using the same foods that you were using at the bottom of your cut, just in higher amounts. If you do that, you're going to have a lot less cravings. You're going to deal with a lot less hunger. Yeah, you want to be just gorging on pizza right now because you said, okay, well, the cut's over, therefore my work is done. It's not done. It's never done. That's kind of the fun thing with fitness is that if you really start to look at this as like a lifestyle change and a change of the way that you view things, it's never done. And that doesn't mean that it's discouraging. That means that you go from one goal to the next. And so maybe when you go to maintenance, your goal is, okay, I'm going to get as strong and fit as possible. And so you switch your mindset from, oh, well, now I get to eat as much, traditional junk food and everything. And now I don't have to watch what I eat anymore. You still probably do. You can be a little bit more lax with some of the calories because a little bit of a calorie variance means less when you're at maintenance, but you're still going to have concerted effort, and you're probably going to have some concerted effort for the rest of your life because it's super easy to just, down a pack of powdered donuts, but it's a lot harder to, make sure that you're getting enough protein, make sure that you're eating your fruits and vegetables, doing all these different things that we know that we should be doing. But I think that the easiest thing that you can do when people say tips for a successful maintenance phase is the same type of thing that you can do during a cut, but you have a little bit of a difference in like the volume of the types of foods that you eat. In the majority of situations that you go into, I would recommend saying, ask yourself, what would a healthy person do in my situation? It's easy, it sounds stupid, but the easiest, very readily available things to do are often the best. If there are no barriers to stopping you from doing it, you're more likely to do it. And if you ask yourself what a healthy person would do in any situation where you have a question about how you should be eating, how you should be training, all those different types of things, most people will have a general idea of what they should be doing. And this removes a lot of the question. And when you remove a lot of the variables that are in play, it'll make you much more likely to stick to something that you want to do. And that doesn't mean that you can't have pizza or anything like that, but it does mean that if you're asking yourself this regularly, you're probably going to prevent yourself from going off the rails. And then when you realize that you're in a really important situation, something like a date night or a holiday or something that you really want to celebrate, you can have that without guilt. And so that's having that nice balance between it. There's a difference between, okay, I'm going to have, pizza on Super Bowl Sunday because I've been looking forward to this all year versus it's Tuesday and now I just want pizza. Well, maybe that's the time that it's not as important to you and you reach for the grilled chicken or fish or steak or whatever it is. And then you say, hey, look, I've got something fun coming up this weekend. I'll have the pizza then. And it makes it okay to have a more moderated meal now. Works the same way whether it's a cut, works the same way whether it's maintenance. But these are the types of ways that you shift that mindset to make your life a lot easier along this journey because it's simple when you really get down to it. When you cut out all the noise of social media, all of the false claims, all that different type of stuff, it's rather simple, but it's not easy. It's difficult. And so you set up some of these tactics and strategies to be able to overcome the challenges that you face. Because one of the things that I talk about a lot on a podcast, and I actually was just on a podcast with Ethan Suppley this week. If any of you have seen My Name is Earl, he was the brother on My Name is Earl. And he does a lot of health and fitness and nutrition stuff these days. He lost like 160 or 170 pounds or something like that. And he's really big into this stuff. Mindset is a really big thing of his because he found that along his journey in losing all of that weight, mindset became one of the most important things. Planning ahead was one of the things that we talked about, and we talked about a bunch of these different strategies, but really simplifying your life can make this a lot easier because people struggle to build muscle, to lose body fat, and it's because there's so much noise out there. So if something seems complicated when you're being presented it by a social media personality, whether they're a doctor or not, it's probably wrong. Overcomplication makes people pay attention because simplifying things is kind of boring and not sexy. But that's what actually works. Whether it's training, nutrition, all those different types of things, mastering the basics is really where it's at. If you start to focus on that, you'll be doing 99% of what you need to do. How much of a role do you believe genetics plays in someone's weight and ability to lose weight? It plays a significant role in your current weight um, when you haven't taken habits into account. When we look at the research and it talks about if you look at a person, how much does their genetics make an influence on their ability to lose weight? It's 2.4%. I don't think that the person was expecting me to actually know the exact percentage there, but when we look at this in studies, it's about 2.4%. Your genetics do not dictate whether or not you can or cannot lose weight. It is almost entirely dictated by your actions, your habits, and your routines. So even people with like a higher base weight point can successfully lose body fat, can lose excess body weight. It just takes revamping your habits, your routines, your lifestyle to be able to do it. And they did another study that looked at twins, a twin cohort, and they tried to see, okay, well, how much is the way that we react to stress as far as food goes, how much is that related to genetics? And how much is that related to our lifestyle, our life experiences, and our environment? And they found that life experiences and environment accounted for more than 95% of the way that we eat, that we have cravings, that we react to stress as far as food goes. Stress eating, emotional eating is a learned experience. This is a good thing because it means that your genetics are not dooming you to stay in the place that you are. It means that if you've learned these bad habits, you can unlearn them. It's just going to take concerted effort, but that's a very empowering thing because you know that you're not doomed. So, really good thing. You can take control. It's just going to take having a little bit of hope and then putting those strategies forward. Um, how to calculate total daily energy expenditure precisely. If there was an easy answer for this, you could make a book. There would be no need for coaches. You could make a book. You could easily put this out and people could just copy it and find their TDEE. Um, the research on this, when we look at all of the most popular equations out there, they're off pretty significantly, unfortunately. And it's just because there's individual variation between people. And even people's RMR, their resting metabolic rate, can be varied from another person that's a similar body composition and weight as you by 600 calories per day. And that's pretty significant. So if you think that you're in a 250 calorie deficit, you could be in a 250 calorie surplus or something like that. I mean, that's how significant this can be. And so, how precise are these calculations, and how do you calculate this precisely? You don't worry about that. You either get a coach if you don't know what you're doing, because there's going to need to be adjustments over time. But the way that a coach would do it, or somebody that really understands how to do this type of thing, you make an estimated guess. It's essentially a guesstimate to start out. And then if a person is consistent and adherent with a diet over 4 or 6 weeks or so, you can dial them in based on rate of weight loss or weight gain, depending on their goals. And that's how you figure out precisely where a person's energy needs are. Outside of actually testing and then following over a period of a month or a month and a half or two, you can't ever know. It's all a guess. And so people hate that answer, but unfortunately, that's where we are. We don't really have the direct answer for each individual person. These calculations are more of a calculation at a general society level. And so you as a person, people love the idea of I'm unique and I'm different, but they hate it when it comes to stuff like this. You are unique and you're different. And this is one of the areas that that kind of really shines in that these calculators, these equations, they're not really appropriate for you unless you are like Joe average, like dead average. And so that it's kind of interesting because these equations are usually often based off of people that don't exercise very much. They're usually based off of people that have that like skinny fat body type. And then when you start to do these exercises, when you start to get this kind of stuff under your belt, it really throws this all off. And there's a difference between an individual rate of error and then a population size rate of error. So that's where you're seeing this. Trying to trim down those last bits of fat. Which one should we consider lessening first, carbs or fat? Is as long as protein and calories are equated, it doesn't really matter for the ratios of carbs to fat as long as you're reaching fat minimums. So whatever you prefer to get rid of first for fat loss is what you should get rid of. If you have a better lifestyle, eating more fats, then certainly eat more fats. If you got a better lifestyle, eating more carbs, certainly eat more carbs. As long as the protein and the calories are equated, you're going to do just fine. Um, what are general rules for carb consumption grams per pound? So I don't like to give general rules for carb consumption for fat loss because it is technically the only non-essential macronutrient. So theoretically, depending on the situation that you're in, you can take them rather low. But you should be aware of the fact that there is a range that appears to maximally benefit building lean muscle, and it's anywhere between 3 and 8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, when people do the math on that, they'll realize that that is really high for most people, and it is high to the point where you're probably not losing body fat because it's probably going to put you at maintenance or above. That's true because you're not going to optimally build muscle in a calorie deficit anyway. So you shouldn't expect it to allow you to lose body fat at the same time. So having said that, having carbs higher if your goal is to both lose body fat and gain muscle at the same time is probably a smart move. It leads to better recovery. It leads to better performance in the gym. It leads to less use of amino acids for energy because if you've got more carbs, you're going to pull from the carbs first. So it allows more amino acids to be used to actually build lean muscle. So there's a lot of reasons why you might keep carbs as high as you possibly could. And when lean muscle building is a goal, that's certainly one of those times where you consider it. So is there an exact number? No. And there's not an exact number when you're in a cut, a general rule for carb consumption because of the fact that you're going to be balancing this with the calorie intake that you have. And so you kind of just do the best you can. After a cut, do I need to increase calories slowly back to maintenance or straight back? Just like we talked about in the beginning, the answer is straight back is smarter. If you increase calories slowly, yes, you're going to see less of a jump in the scale during like each week. You're going to gain by the end of that back to maintenance, you're going to gain the same amount of weight as if you just went back immediately. So when you jump back immediately, you're going to see the scale jump faster, sooner. But you're also going to get out of metabolic adaptation, which means your body's going to start recovering sooner. And a lot of these reverse diets, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks, and you're sticking people in a very, very long metabolic adaptation period. And so you're actually probably causing more harm than good because reverse diets have never been shown to cause a benefit physiologically. So it's all something that coaches are doing because they want people to feel better about the process. And if you were just to explain this to people and say, hey, look, this 5 pound jump that you're going to experience, you're going to experience it whether or not we do it immediately or not. It's going to happen. So is it better for it to happen now and for you to start recovering better, your hormones to rebalance better, your energy levels to rebalance better, your NEAT levels to balance, to rebalance better? Or do you essentially, this is essentially like coddling somebody as a coach and being like, oh, this is not as good for you, but we'll do this because of, whatever reason. So you have to make that choice for yourself. But if it's at least explained to you, you can make that right choice. And I would always recommend that people go back to maintenance first because there's just a lot of benefits to it. And there's no true benefit to the reverse dieting other than you kind of get to delay how much of the weight that you put on for a couple weeks. But while you're doing that, your hormones are still unbalanced. So there's no fun there. Um, do blood sugar spikes hamper weight loss? No, they don't. Not even remotely. If you're in a calorie deficit, blood sugar spikes mean nothing from a weight loss perspective. They can't stop it. So that's one of those old myths that keeps getting pushed around because of the carbohydrate insulin crowd. But that whole theory has been debunked for about 20 years now. But it makes for a good book. So people like selling them. All right, breaking up sleep into two 4 hour chunks instead of sleeping for 8 hours straight. Are there the same benefits? No, there's not. If you can get sleep all in one go, it's more beneficial than breaking it up into two chunks. Are two chunks of 4 hours more beneficial than um, like 6 hours of straight sleep? It probably is. I don't have any direct evidence to that, but I have seen evidence that suggests that, like makeup sleep and naps and those different types of things do have benefits. So rather than worrying about whether or not this is going to be perfect, figure out what you can do and what fits within your lifestyle. And if two 4 hour chunks are what fit, certainly do that. Don't get down on yourself. This entire journey is about doing what you can do. This is not an all or nothing thing. And I think that people that really get focused on, well, what's absolutely perfect on paper, but it doesn't fit in your lifestyle, literally all you're going to do is stress yourself out. And if we want to talk about all like the cortisol and all those different types of hormone fear mongering out there, what is stressing yourself out going to do? This is the stuff that we want to avoid anyways. And so this is one of those things that I would not randomly go out of my way to break up an 8 hour thing of sleep just to get two 4 hour chunks for no reason. But if 2 hour chunk or two 4 hour chunks are what you can do that. You're gonna be fine. Goal, gain toned muscle and lean out. Is it better to be in a calorie deficit, maintenance, or surplus? This is going to be depending on your current body composition and how experienced you are. If you are significantly overweight with body fat, and you have some muscle present, then a calorie deficit is almost always the answer. If you are skinny fat and you have like no real muscle, and I've worked with a lot of people that are like, I want to get toned. I'm 145 pounds. I've never lifted before in my life. What should I do? Well, the answer for a person like that is probably to stay at maintenance a year, two, or three and build lean muscle. Because if you try to cut down, you're going to really slow the amount of time that it takes to build that muscle itself, which is going to take a significant amount of time anyways. And people will do this to chase to seeing the scale drop because they think that if the scale drops and they lose body fat, then they're going to look exactly the way that they want to look. Now, technically, you can continue to lose body fat, but what's going to end up happening is you're going to look gaunt and like sickly. Like think about the way that these people are looking on the GLP-1s where they get the hollowed out faces and their eyes are all hollowed out and they start to like lose their hair and stuff. I mean, you can technically do that like at any muscle level. But if you want to have that actual like toned athletic physique, that's not the way to do it. Starvation is not the right way. And so having that buy-in, and even on my Instagram post today was literally about this, having that buy-in of building some lean muscle and committing to that for an extended period of time for most people, if you're not obese is probably smart. Now, you could do that at a very small calorie deficit, depending on where you are and depending on what emotionally you need. But I would stress that you're probably not going to live your life in a calorie deficit and be super successful long term. You're probably going to have to spend a lot of time at maintenance or above. And the sooner that we can start to wrap our heads around that, the easier our lives are going to be because we're going to finally start to move to where we want to be. Even though it feels like it takes a lot longer to get there in this way, it is the fastest way to get there. So, building muscle, everybody needs to spend a significant portion of their time focusing on that and you start to make the difference in expectations and motivation by switching that mindset of okay, well, I'm going to be watching the scale drop every day, every week to hey, how can I watch, can I start to find value in the performance increases that I have? Can I start to see these things as the way that I'm moving forward properly? And if you do that, you're going to be fine. But it is kind of a culture shock and a shift in the way that you think. And we've been thinking in certain ways as signs of success for 40, 50, 60 years, and then having to make this shift is jarring. And so these conversations have to come up a lot, and they've got to come up a lot because people need to hear it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you if this is one of those things that it takes a lot of time to seep in. But hopefully, after trying to lose fat and lose fat and lose fat and lose fat in years and years and years and not getting there, maybe it's time to start thinking about things a little bit differently and then doing it the right way. And usually people have to fail and fail and fail and fail, you know, trying all of these different, fads and tricks and all those different things until they start to listen to this stuff. And so, again, this is actually one of the conversations that I had with Ethan Suppley over this past weekend, and I'm very excited for that podcast to come out because I think that this podcast is one of the best things to put these things into perspective because it was a wonderful talk, especially with somebody that had been through that type of thing and can give you a direct sign of this is the mindset that a person that had to lose that much weight went through. And he was talking about how he always tried to do all these different fads, and he was in Hollywood, and so that's literally all that was around there. There was nobody in Hollywood. None of the Hollywood trainers were preaching about doing it right. They were all like trying to sell something. And so until he got away from the Hollywood trainer crowd, he couldn't really succeed in this type of thing. But that conversation is really important because it does make a huge difference. How to increase energy expenditure when you work at a desk. You want to take that one, Beth?
Yeah, so you got to get up and move. There's really no simple way to say that. So one of the recommendations that Alan and I always give is it's something called the desk cycle, and it's actually something that you can throw underneath your desk and you put your feet in it and you literally just cycle around. That's probably the easiest thing to do, or to get a walking pad. You can get those on Amazon. So they're designed to be slower than treadmills so that you can actually type and talk on the phone and stuff like that while you're walking. So anybody that has a standing desk, which I would encourage anyway, if you get a little walking pad to put under it, you can definitely increase your NEAT that way. If neither of those are an option, although I don't know why at least the desk cycle wouldn't be. But if you're not interested in that, unfortunately, you're going to have to intentionally get up and move around. You cannot increase your activity without increasing your activity. You literally cannot stay seated behind your desk all day.
Well, that and those walking pads are only like $125 for like a
Yeah, they're not too
really
bad.
good
They're not
one.
too bad. You do have to have a standing desk with them.
Yeah,
So I mean
yeah.
that might be prohibitive for some people, but they're still pretty inexpensive considering what they are. But those are the two I think really good options. I've had a couple of clients get that desk cycle, and that has really they've loved it because they can literally they literally just pedal away all day. They don't even really realize that they're doing it, but they're cranking out. Their NEAT is much higher when they use it.
Yeah, and the other strategy that I really like to use is I always tell people, and this is something that literally everybody should be doing if you're not getting, the activity in your day that you think you should be getting. Set an alarm every hour, walk for 5 minutes at the end of every hour. I promise you this is not going to cut into your productivity at work. It's probably going to make you more productive by oxygenating your brain. But people have this real thing, hang up about like doing anything other than work when they're at work. But this is the way that you start to incorporate it because if you're say like you're shooting for like 8,000 steps per day, if you're trying to do this at the end of the day, that's going to feel like a huge burden. But if you're doing, 5 minutes of walking every hour while you're at work, it's going to make it a lot easier because you're going to get a lot of that covered just at work. In fact, you're probably going to get most, if not all of it covered just at
Yeah.
work.
And
Um,
companies legally cannot chain you to your desk. They cannot tell you that you cannot get up for 5 minutes to go walk. They legally cannot do that. OSHA exists for a reason.
yeah, I haven't experienced this in a while, but I remember when we first started coaching, from the first 2 years or so, I had probably a handful of people be like, because we were setting up like nutrition and stuff like that with people and with busy jobs and stuff. And they're like, I can't eat lunch. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm not allowed to eat lunch. I'm like, that's illegal.
It's
And so,
illegal.
and
Yeah.
so like
I've
it's
had and I
completely
have had
illegal.
people tell me that before that they're not allowed to do that at work. I'm like, then you should report them. Like
Oh,
that
yeah,
that is
that's
illegal to do that. And I do know that Amazon, because we had a friend, Jackie, worked for Amazon, and they actually have to log out when they go to the bathroom. So I
fine.
do know
Log
that
out.
Amazon is like, but I don't know what kind of rules they operate under or what Bezos has done, but that's the only company that I know of that actually has like they're required to log out, like when they go to the bathroom, when they go eat lunch and stuff like that.
I mean, they can legally do that, and that's fine. But you still are owed that. So
Right,
you can get
right.
up and you can walk around for 5 minutes every
And
hour,
it's
and it's
literally
completely
5 minutes.
yeah,
And
it's
that's all
fine.
we're saying. Like
Yeah.
you'd be surprised, you really would be surprised at the impact that just 5 minutes multiple times throughout the day, how much that really adds up. And I think a lot of people don't even try to do it because their conceptualization of what will happen in 5 minutes is just that it's like not even worth it. It's nothing, but it is actually quite tremendous.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, so there you have it. What is the hierarchy of healthy eating? Okay, then he goes on to ask different things like macronutrients, sugars, alcohols, all these different types of things. So when we talk about things like macros and calorie counting, that has nothing, I mean, it's indirectly, it's not a direct measure of health. Um, Health is a combination of how many calories are you taking in during a day versus how many are you expending versus how many do you need versus, what's your current body composition like versus what are the food choices that you're making. Like it's less reductionist than what this question is essentially trying to turn it into.
Wait, is the
So,
question hierarchy of being healthy or hierarchy of healthy eating?
hierarchy of healthy eating.
Okay.
And so the answer is calories matter a lot for the day, both in and out. And so I'm bringing out the out because that influences what the in does.
Mhm.
So calories in, um, protein is really high up in importance on that, and then whole minimally processed foods. If these are your focuses, that's what you really should be focusing on for optimal health. Am I getting an appropriate amount of calories for whatever my goal in health is? Am I getting enough protein in my daily life? And am I eating mostly whole minimally processed foods? I think that really trying to break it down, like some of these other things that they asked about are how important these are, like micronutrients, sugar, like all those different types of things. I would not go out of my way to count these. I mean, that is orthorexia,
Well, and if you
and
hit the other three, if you hit the main three, the rest of that's going to be self-limiting. Like you're probably not going to be eating that much sugar if you're focused on minimally processed whole foods, fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. You're not getting much in the way of additional sugars.
yeah, I mean, it kind of handles itself. And that's why I would really focus on like habit type things. And what we're talking about that is like choosing lean proteins, go to my Instagram. I mean, I just literally yesterday put up a macros cheat sheet. Choose from that center column. That's all lean proteins. Add in fruits and veggies. There you go. As long as the base of your diet are those two things, health.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. And so, I mean, sure, certainly you can argue for some dairy and stuff like that for some calcium and stuff, but yeah, I mean, those are the big things. And so it doesn't have to be as complicated as a lot of people are making it. And so this is again one of those things where simplifying it, people are like, oh, I kind of already knew that. Well, yeah, you do. And that's the really great thing about health is that you probably do know the answers, even if you don't know maybe the rote specifics. You kind of know the answers. And that's why, what would a healthy person do really works because you do kind of know it. It's not easy again, and there's no shame in if you haven't gotten to your goals, and that's okay. That's normal. But it's not as complicated as people make it seem. And so anything that is like a super restrictive diet or really tries to overcomplicate things, be very skeptical. I mean, if anybody wants a general guideline of how their diets should look, I mean, the Mediterranean diet is probably the best thing to look at because that kind of covers all of the balance of everything that we would talk about on a healthy diet. A lot of polyunsaturated fats, a lot of fruits and veggies, a lot of lean proteins, a lot of fish, a lot of, all these different types of things that we always talk about. So if you ever get caught, just look up stuff about the Mediterranean diet. That's the best thing you can possibly do. Can you lower cholesterol levels naturally without a statin? Quick answer, yes. Does that mean that you should avoid taking a statin if your doctor tells you to take a statin? No. But yes, you can lower cholesterol levels naturally without a statin. I mean, that's what, higher fiber foods, exercise, those different types of things. If you've got a genetic predisposition to higher cholesterol levels, limiting saturated fat and cholesterol intake, these different things will make a big difference. But again, I mean, Mediterranean diet. So that kind of nestled nicely into that conversation there. Um, let's see. Are 4 protein feedings better than 3 for muscle growth? So the totals at the end of the day are far more important than anything else. And if you are having problems hitting totals, you shouldn't even worry about anything until you start to do that. After doing that, is there going to be a benefit for, say, 4 feedings over 3 for muscle growth? There might be probably in larger people. So, like men in general. there might be a benefit to doing that. It just spreads out those protein feeding so you can keep muscle protein synthesis higher for longer. And if it takes 25 or so grams to maximize muscle protein synthesis for women for a certain period of time, and it takes 30 grams for men to maximize protein synthesis for a certain period of time. I mean, 30 times 4, 120 grams. I mean, you could do it for women too. But this is one of those things that this is more of a thought exercise than a, hey, we've got really distinct data that shows this. We've got some theories as to why this would work. And it's probably easier if you're trying to get in like 30 grams of protein at each meal. It's probably easier to spread it out than trying to get like 100 grams in a meal. So if I were you guys and you were setting this up, if you were setting up your nutrition, you wanted to make it as easy as possible, what I would do is I would figure out the protein amounts that you want for the day. And then I would divide that by the number of meals that you plan on eating. And that's how I would start to look towards planning my protein. I think that's probably one of the easiest ways. Now, you can certainly do like, okay, well, I want my goal to be 30 grams of protein at my main meals. And then you can fit in the rest of whatever your daily goal is and however you would like. And I think that that's another great way to do it. Um, I don't know if you have any other strategies that you like to use, Beth, but those are the two that I really like to give people as just general guidelines for doing this. But again,
Yeah,
it's the totals are far more important than anything else.
agreed.
Is there any substantial evidence that blood flow restriction training yields better results for hypertrophy? Better results, no. Better results for lighter weight, yes. The thing with blood flow restriction training is it seems to work, but it seems to lower strength progress and some of the soft tissue adaptations that we have. So like it may not benefit the tendons and the ligaments as much. It may not benefit bones as much because there's less weight on the bones. Blood flow restriction training. I am a big fan of flow restriction training. I'm not a big fan for the average person. I'm a big fan of blood flow restriction training when you have an injury or a pathology that prevents you from lifting heavy. And so if you've got, like severe tendonitis, or if you've got risks for osteoporosis, and maybe that's a time where you can start to bring these in play until you start to build up a little bit more, and then you start to get into, the heavier weights once you switch out of that. I would not use BFR if I was a normal person and I was just trying to gain lean muscle. A lot of people are starting to use it as like, oh, it's going to make my muscles bigger if I just start doing BFR because it's a new fad and it's great. And no, it's not going to be better than standard training. It's better for rehab modalities than a lot of things. And so it's a good way to prevent muscle loss in a lot of different rehab type situations. Um, would you consider normal walking cardio? If I get a certain amount of steps, do I still need to do cardio? Do you want to take that one, Beth?
This is kind of a loaded question for me. So
That's why I was giving it to you.
I would say that it is going to depend on how much cardio you're doing. So if you're running just like 2 miles a day, you still need to be getting your steps in. Where a step count is kind of useless is if you have people that are running that are accumulating a decent amount of mileage daily or weekly. So like people who are training for a marathon, are you actually going to tell them that they need a step goal? Because they're probably running 15 miles a day. Like I would never in my right mind tell somebody like that they need to hit 10,000 steps a day on top of what they're accumulating already with their marathon training.
So
So
this is a funny question. Sorry about that. You go ahead.
Um, if you're just sort of a hobbyist runner and you're getting, you're running like a mile or two here or there, or even 3 miles here or there, I do still see benefit in looking at your overall step count. So I'll use myself as an example. I run twice a week, usually 3 miles at a time. I still get 10,000 steps a day on top of those 3 miles. Today, I actually had to run 6 miles this morning. I am not holding myself to clocking 10,000 steps on top of that because I've already hit 10,000 steps today. If I try to get 10,000 on top of this, I'm just running myself into the ground at that point. So I do think that the quantity of how much cardio you're doing is important in this conversation. Does walking itself actually count as cardiovascular exercise for the adaptations that we're talking about for your heart? And I think the answer to that is no.
So this is funny because this is almost like I set Beth up where I was like, answer this question. So I don't I actually think that she did a really great job there, and I knew that she was going to do a great job. It's just funny to like throw this at somebody when they don't really know what's coming. So
Thanks.
yeah, I think I'm gonna fuck her
Glad
up.
I passed
So
your
yeah,
test.
yeah. Screw Beth. So here's the thing. Like I agree with everything that she said. I've got a couple of little things that I want to add in because I know that she knows this. I know that this is a touchy conversation. Let me put it that
And I'm
way.
pretty sure I know where this comes from. I'm pretty sure that this comes from
I know where this comes from too.
that sound clip of Gabrielle Lyon saying that walking does not count as cardio. And
So
I don't fundamentally disagree with what she was trying to say. I think the delivery of it wasn't the best, but I do
it's
agree that if you're walking, like if you're just trudging along at a Sunday stroll pace, no. The cardiovascular adaptations that we want from doing actual cardio exercise are not achieved with just strolling and bowling down the street.
it was just an unfortunate sound clip
It
because
was.
I
It
think that it
was.
was I think that it was taken out of context. And I want to give a little bit of that context to kind of answer. The answer is, does this count as cardio? And the answer is yes and no.
Mhm.
It's still exercise. Does it count as cardio? Yes and no. It's going to depend a lot on one, what the number one thing that it would depend on is what is your current level of experience in body composition. If you have never done cardio before, if you haven't done cardio in 10 years, if you have
Yeah.
like severe obesity or severe immobility, it's 100% going to count as cardio.
Yeah.
100%.
Because even strolling and bowling then
It's going to raise your heart
gonna
rate. It's
raise your
it's
heart
going
rate.
to it's going to improve your cardiovascular health status.
It's
Yes.
going to get those adaptations from cardio
Mhm.
that we're looking for.
Now, when we see coaches talk about this, maybe they've got a clientele that is more experienced. In a more experienced clientele, particularly with better body compositions, is walking going to count as cardio? Probably not, because it's not going to stress them enough to cause the beneficial adaptations. And so
Yeah.
this is like asking, okay, well, is doing bicep curls with 5 pounds, really good strength training? It could be if you've never
Somebody
lifted
who's never
weights
lifted.
before. Yeah. Is it going to be good strength training for me? No. So this is where there's that nuance that like jumping on a clip and nobody, I don't know who put that clip out. They probably just didn't think about what it was going to sound like
Yeah.
because
I
like
actually felt bad for Gabby on this one because
yeah, that
I really I know what she was trying to say. And there were a bunch of people that, kind of jumped down her throat and said that this, creates barriers to fitness. And to your point of like, if you have a completely out of shape clientele that has literally never worked out a day in their life, then I can understand that.
it does count as cardio then.
I can totally understand that side of the argument. But
Yeah.
for everybody to just kind of jump on and say that, she was, I don't agree with how that whole thing was handled with her.
So the answer is it's probably nuanced.
Yeah.
And it's either you either just look at it as straight neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or you look at it
Yeah.
as cardio. And
Yeah.
and if you're looking at it as cardio, I mean that's okay. That just means you might be a little bit, more obese and maybe detrained or maybe never trained, and that's okay because then it does actually count. But the most important thing, whether or not we look at this as cardio, is what can you do? What is accessible to you? What will get you moving? And if you're somebody that's already running 3 miles 3 times a week, I don't really need to ask you that question. You're already doing it. So maybe
Yeah.
this isn't the right question for
Yeah.
you. And maybe you shouldn't get buttered over it at the same
Yeah.
time. So so I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that is dependent on the situation and the person that we're talking about. And I think that nuance gets lost in social media a lot of the time. Differences between lunges and split squats. Oh God. I mean, this is going to go back to the same thing that we talked about in the beginning. Do what you can do, switch things out, do different things, different cycles. It doesn't matter. Like this is really overthinking. Like, are you
Yeah.
really
This
pushing
is,
yourself on the split squats? Are you really pushing yourself on the lunges? That's it.
yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
I mean they're technically kind of working the same thing, right? Because it's a lunge pattern. Both of them are lunge patterns. So it's if you prefer to do split squats, if you like them better, cool. If you like lunges better, cool. Probably should do both of them because you can load up split squats pretty damn heavy. Whereas if you're doing walking lunges, sometimes the balance can kind of make you need to reduce the weight a little bit. But
yeah, but again, the funny thing with this again is that conversation comes back into play. Well, what else are you doing in this training
right,
block? You know,
for
or
sure.
like if you're doing like a heavy squat beforehand, do you really need to load it up super
To
heavy,
do
or
a
do we
heavy
use
ass
this?
split squat, probably
Right,
not.
you know, and so when people ask these questions, it's like, ah, fuck, we got to answer this, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, what's the training look like? Like, what,
Right.
you know, how experienced is this person? That's kind of the cool thing with like the Iron Core training is that we take care of all this for you, so you don't have to think about this. um, is that we've already considered this when we're programming, and so the answer is it kind of depends, but usually this is like a splitting hairs type question.
Yeah.
And again, over multiple training blocks, this type of discrepancy is going to work its way out, and it's not really going to make a difference as far as progress goes. What are your thoughts on heavy metal detoxes? Do they work? Yeah, they absolutely work. Do you need one? No, you don't. Because anybody that's asking me this question does not need a heavy metal detox. If you have a problem with actual heavy metal buildup in your body, your doctor is already throwing you into something like activated charcoal or another heavy metal detox. If you're like, I wonder if I need heavy metal detoxes, you don't fucking need a heavy metal detox. You're somebody that's probably going to you know, a kind of an off the path doctor that's trying to sell you on tests and treatments and stuff like that. So don't fall for this crap. If your actual PCP tells you to get on a heavy metal detox, you better get on it. Do these liquid IVs and similar actually hydrate you better or just expensive Kool-Aid? So liquid IV is not an actual IV with this question based on what they're saying here. It is a brand of electrolytes. We've covered electrolytes before. Quick answer, no. Most people don't need these. Do they hydrate better than just water? Yes, they do. Do you need it? No, you probably just need to drink regular water. Unless you are in something that is causing a massive amount of water loss, you don't need to be doing this. So, you know, triathlon training, marathon, working out in like a bay door gym in the south in the summer, 105-degree heat, 100-degree humidity, that kind of stuff.
And
You
if you
might need
do
this.
need these, you need the sugar that's in them. I
You
swear to
definitely
God,
need the sugar. Yeah.
if I see one more company that promotes a sugar-free electrolyte drink, I'm going to lose my mind.
That's
You
typically a
need
sign that they're just trying to take your money.
Yes, you need glucose when it comes to electrolytes and water replacement inside the body. You need glucose. So like people that do like the Gatorade Light or the G2 or whatever the hell it is. I'm
You just want
like
Kool-Aid, and that's okay.
you're defeating the purpose of the electrolyte concoction. Stop.
Yeah. Turkesterone keeps coming up in my feed. What is it and why? Well, holy shit. I mean, it's a very broad question.
Let me see
Turkesterone,
your search history,
yeah,
bro.
check out Google first. Turkesterone is an ecdysterone analog. Turkesterone it's, I don't know if it's exactly a hormone. It's a plant hormone, I think. And the claims around it are that it's going to optimize like testosterone production and lean muscle mass and all that kind of stuff, which is awesome if you're a plant. Does not work in humans. And it's this is something that's been around since like 2004, and like every 5 years it crops back up because some influencer is trying to sell it and make a bunch of money. And the way that they do this, it like cycles in and out every like 5 years. And the way that they do this is whenever they sell these turkesterone supplements, they actually fill them with a bunch of steroids. And so they sell them really like hardcore for like a year and a half. And people are like, they work really well. And then like we test them and we're
Yeah.
like, there's nothing in it that works. And then
Yeah, because you're on steroids.
they have these like really great gains. And so like these guys that are yeah, because you're on steroids. And these guys get these like really great like testimonials for these things. And then every time they're tested, we're like, there's steroids in this. And so I probably just sold a bunch of turkesterone right there. But yeah, there's nothing like turkesterone itself doesn't seem to work, but the turkesterone products that are on the market may work. And you may have a buddy that's like, I swear to God that these things work. There's a reason that he thinks that because it is probably the single most adulterated supplement that there ever is. And that's why it gets sold, gets taken off the market, comes back in 5 years. Because if they keep doing it that way, the FDA has no time to kind of like regulate it. Because the FDA doesn't like make any like harsh step-ins unless like somebody dies. And so they'll pick like a really week prohormone, but a weak prohormone is still better than any natural supplement. And they will put it in these things and tell people, run this for 8 weeks, and then they gain like 15 pounds and they look really good because steroids work. And so this is how they trick people with these types of things. Um, if my sets of 12 are done in 15 seconds, is that too fast to build muscle? Um, Probably. I mean, that's very quick.
Yeah, because that's less than a 201 tempo.
Yeah,
So
that's a very quick
so you
tempo.
you can if you take the tempo, so 201, that's three
Yeah, it's three
seconds.
seconds
You
per set
multiply
per
that by the
rep.
number of reps you
Yeah,
have.
so it
That
should be
should tell you how
36.
long the set should take you.
So this is
So
about half the time.
yeah. If you're, and that's usually what I tell people. If you do the math, 201, so 3 seconds total, times the number of reps you're supposed to do, that should tell you how long that set should take. If it
Mhm.
takes you shorter than that to do that set, you're using weight that's too light.
All right, one last question. Should you fast for an easy 45-minute run to help with fat oxidation? Um, no, you should never fast for a run that's that long. Will that help with fat oxidation? 100% that will help with fat oxidation. Is that a good thing? No, it's not a good thing. And this goes back to people believing that fat oxidation means fat loss, and fat oxidation does not mean fat loss. Fat oxidation means you are burning fat for fuel at that specific time. If you burn fat for fuel at that specific time, but you have the same calories and macronutrient intake for the rest of the day, your body will simply burn carbs for the rest of the day. And so at the end of the day, it's net wash. And so people will get this in their mind. And this is why things like the fat burning zone for like cardio, like where people are like, oh, go, walk because you're going to burn 10% more fat. It's true, but it's counterbalanced by the rest of your day. Your body auto regulates. Your body says, oh, I've used a lot of my body fat stores. I'm now going to use the excess carbs because we didn't burn through muscle glycogen because I didn't need to. And so it starts to pull from carbs. And so you're not tricking your body, you're just tricking yourself by trying to like maximize fat oxidation from things like this, assuming the rest of your intake is the same. And so this is why that calories in, calories out always wins because your body is going to change the substrate oxidation, whether it pulls from proteins, fats, or carbs, or alcohol if it's in play. Whether it pulls from those things, it's going to switch that up based off of what you're using. And if you're using too much of one thing, it'll start pulling from another. And so you can't trick it into just pulling from one. Because if you've got extra carbs in your system and it's pulling from the body fat stores, and then so it's just pulled from all those body fat stores, you're getting the same amount of calories, and by the end of the day, those carbs that were not pulled will now go right into those fat cells. It'll essentially replenish them. And so we've got a miscommunication of what's actually happening. And so people think by maximizing fat oxidation. I see this a lot um, in what like male competitors do. They base it off of the oxidation rates. Like bodybuilding competitors will do this, and without realizing that, yeah, I mean, burning calories is going to work, but when you're trying to do this, you're probably going to burn less calories overall because 45 minutes of running under with like a carb depleted situation, an unfed situation, is going to lower your performance for this significantly. Um, and so by having more carbs in the situation and having an equated amount of calories through the day, you're going to perform better over those 45 minutes. So there will be a net higher calorie burn, which is more important for fat loss. So this is a misinterpretation of what's actually going on, and the fact that fat is said in both situations, fat loss and fat oxidation, is really confusing people because they think that fat burn equals fat loss, and it doesn't. It just shows you what you're burning at that one time period. So, no, please fuel yourself if you're going to be doing longer cardio sessions. Now, keep in mind, they did say an easy 45-minute run. They didn't say a walk. You don't necessarily have to pound carbs before a walk. I probably wouldn't do it completely fasted if it's that long, but there's also no reason to like carb load for a walk. So this is again one of those like nuanced situations, but hopefully that gives a little bit of insight and can kind of explain to people why there are these claims that people make of, look, I'm burning more fat, and they can show you studies that shows that that's true, and that seems very convincing from a fat loss standpoint, and yet it doesn't burn any more, it doesn't cause any more fat loss. So it's a misinterpretation of what's happening, and most of the time the people that are making these claims, they also don't really understand what's happening, and so that's what's going on there. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you for joining us for another live Q&A. Make sure to ask us any questions that you have for um, the upcoming Q&A in this next week, and we will answer any questions that you guys have in the Mighty Networks community. We will see you there.